It's recording. Were we not recording the whole time?
Seems like every road you're on is hit a dead end. There is hope. Let me show.
Did you fart?
No, it was my pen.
Well, I think that's the intro for this episode. How you guys doing? We've started. We've started. Hey guys. That was a pen for all of you who don't watch the video content but just listen to audio. We normally pray before every episode, before we go live, and Ellie decided to uncap a permanent marker, and it sounded like a fart. So there we go.
Hello, everybody.
That's fun. That's fun. Oh, that should. I vote for that to be our intro every single time.
Every single time. Oh no.
Well, why not? Why not?
Make it memorable at that point. Oh boy. Well, hello.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. We're here.
We are here for
We are
another
here.
day.
Talking about our stuff. It's gonna be a good one.
The stuff.
The stuff.
The good
Our stuff. So what are we talking about today, Ellie?
Today's your stuff that we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about your breakaway story and
Mhm.
what that entailed. What did that look like?
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, let's see where we go from there.
Well, all right.
Well, how about this? Let's do a refresher on what we spoke about last episode.
Go for it, because that was your episode.
Oh, shoot. As far as I know, correct me if I'm wrong, because remember, my memory's the greatest. We talked about my healing journey, so to speak, and what led up to my breakaway story, and my testimony is more enmeshed. And what did we say? Like, for me, it was like within a year and a half of realizing the truth, healing, and then breaking away. Whereas for you, it was a little bit more spread out. So, ta-da, refresher, done. Now your turn.
All right. Well, from there, yeah. So obviously, if anyone hasn't found out by now, our conversations have been leading up to a point of the whole purpose of this podcast, which is a podcast that tries to tackle the controversial, very difficult topic of abuse from a parent, and our choice as siblings to walk away and what led up to that decision. So every podcast episode has been talking about our story, our situation, and this last categorization of episodes is going to be our essentially our walk away story of what did it take for us to make a decision that says our only option right now is to not have a relationship and to essentially walk away. So with that, when it comes to me, I'll kind of start a little bit more linearly, I guess. So because I was away for school for a long time, I only came back during the holidays and summer for the most part. However, going into my senior year, I really didn't do that as much. I didn't come back for the summer my junior year going into my senior year, I chose to stay up where I lived in Northern California, and I worked for the summer. So I pretty much only had about about a year plus worth of not being back home, not seeing family, not really visiting for the holidays or anything like that. So when it came time for me to graduate and I moved back home, it looked like things were okay. Um, it looked like, when I say okay, I remember when my family came up to visit for my graduation. They came up like a day or two before, and we would go out to eat and kind of hang out around town and whatnot. And it just felt like things were better. It felt like between my parents that communication was better. Things didn't explode into arguments. They weren't fights. There just seemed to be this sense that things were better. And I didn't know if that was true. I didn't know what led up to that. But for all I knew, things just kind of seemed a bit better. So that was kind of my presumption of what things were going to be as I was getting ready to graduate and move back south to where our hometown was. And it was really interesting because graduating was a whole thing. There's a whole story behind that, and kind of what led up to that, to that situation in particular. I won't go into that right now. But when I moved back home, I had about things were just different for me as a person. I lived for about 4 years being away from home, having my own routine, my own schedule, my own identity, my own normal, if you will, of how I live my life. And having to go back home, there's obviously going to have to be some adjustments that happen, living in your parents' house, and that's never fun, but that's just kind of the situation. And I expected it to kind of be some sort of push and pull of having to have some grace and respect, but also freedom for me to kind of be my own person. But things went back to the way they were when I was 17 and I first moved out.
Meaning like how our abuser treated you, or?
Not necessarily. Yes and no. Not necessarily a lot of the old ways, but very much control.
Okay.
Like I remember so when I moved back home, I was 21. I was a grown adult. And I mean, doesn't mean that I was an adult, but I was 21 years old. Right. And we've talked about this in previous episodes, but where we grew up, the house that we lived at, it was on a hill, kind of. So like you have like your main street, but they have all these homes that were kind of built on this maybe 30-foot incline on a hill. So just like these rows of houses. And we had 4 vehicles. Parents had their own car. I had a car. Actually, I don't think my sister had a car at that point.
No, I didn't.
But
so 3 cars. No, I didn't.
Yeah.
So 3
yeah.
cars.
So there was 3 cars. And I had to park up on the top. Abuser had to park behind us because he always had to go to work. So it was just easy for him to be behind everybody. But if we wanted to leave, we had to rotate cars out.
Yeah.
And I think we just never parked on the bottom just because there were always hooligans and people that would break into cars. So it was just easier to not keep our cars down there.
Right.
And I remember there was a time where when I had recently moved back home, I still wasn't allowed to have a key to the house. At that time, there was a lock on our back gate because supposedly there were people who tried to break into the backyard. And so to stop that, there was a bolt lock on the gate handle to open up the gate. So
That's
I
what
didn't have a
started
key to
that?
that. Huh?
That's what started that lock system?
Supposedly.
Oh.
I don't know. Supposedly. That's the story that I was told. So
Oh.
could be a lie, it could be truth, could be a hybrid of both. I don't know.
I don't know either.
But that's what I was told. So there was a key to the back gate, and then I didn't have a key to the house. So I wanted to leave to go see a friend who had moved back home for a little bit, and I hadn't seen her in 4 years. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to go hang out with my friend, Emily. And I remember I was telling our abuser, like, hey, can we rotate cars out? Because I'm going to go see my friend. And we get in the way that a house was, in order, you could either get to the driveway through the front yard or the backyard. It was just quicker to go throughout the backyard to get to our vehicles. So usually 9 times out of 10, regardless of where we're at inside the house, we head to the back door into the backyard to go through the gate to get into the driveway, which is like right there. Right. All of our cars are parked by the back gate, right, where it's locked. And when we get to the gate, he starts interrogating me. And it didn't start off super bad, but he wouldn't unlock the gate. He just stood by the gate, turned around, and asked me, what are you going to go do? And I said, I'm going to go see my friend. And he said, who are you going to go see? I said, I'm going to go see my friend. He goes, no, who is the friend that you're going to go see? And I said, it doesn't matter. And he got really angry at me. And he kind of puffed up his chest and demanded I tell him who I was going to go see. And I said, I'm going to go see my friend Emily. It'll approximately be an hour and 46 minutes. I don't know what you want me to do here, because at that point I was like, no, I'm not doing this again. But also at the same time, I didn't have a job and I just graduated college. So it's not like I could just move out, but there were things like that where he just felt entitled to know exactly what I was doing. And to a normal person, that doesn't necessarily sound too out of the ordinary, like what's the big deal? Just, it's not that hard to communicate to your parents,
right,
or anybody where you're going. But everything with him was
I'm sorry.
Gross.
Sorry.
Gross. Everything with him was just, for me at least, it was built around control. And so there were just things like that. And I wasn't allowed to have a key to the house. I wasn't allowed to go as I pleased. I had to essentially ask permission to leave the house and then tell my abuser where I was going. So I had no sense of ownership to myself. I had no sense of freedom to go anywhere because it was demanded that whenever I left the house, he had to know where I was at.
Sure.
And I forget the specifics, but eventually, as the summer got closer, I was made aware that our parents were going to a family counselor, a marriage counselor / family counselor. And I didn't know for how long. I don't even think I knew her name at that point. But it was revealed to me that there was a counselor. I was like, okay, cool. Maybe that's the reason why things supposedly seem better between our parents. At that time, I mean, I really didn't hear or see a lot of fighting. Doesn't mean that it didn't happen.
Sure.
It could have been off site, meaning not at the house. Maybe it was like when they went out on dates, or I don't know. But for all I know, things like were at least better than what they were before. Better doesn't mean that it was 100% the other way. It just meant that instead of going to World War III, it just wasn't World War III, Right. And so eventually there was a point where we all were told we have to go and talk to the family counselor together
Mhm.
as a family. And I didn't know what it was going to be about, but I just remember thinking there's literally no reason why we should be doing this as a family unless something is going to be announced. You know,
Yeah.
there's no reason for us to do anything, be pulled into a therapist situation when we've never been there before, you know?
Right.
Um, but I was like, so something's happening.
Right.
And I think if I remember correctly, we all actually I don't remember. I don't remember if our abuser was at work and he took his lunch break to come to this meeting. I don't really recall. But I just remember we were all there
I remember
in her
that
office.
scenario.
What scenario?
That it was his lunch break type of thing.
Could have been.
Because
Could have been.
We
I don't
didn't
know.
go
I don't know.
all of us together. He came in his separate car.
Right. Well, I mean, again, I don't know if he was at work. I don't know if he was running errands or doing something. You know, I don't really know where he was at, but I
Sure.
think you're right. He wasn't there on our drive from the house to the therapist's office.
Right.
But we all get there and we all sit, and if I remember correctly, we were kind of like in a person family U shape
Mm-hmm.
with the counselor kind of sitting in the middle away from us. So it kind of looks like a weird, like a dot, like an eye dot with like a like an eyebrow above it, like how you would draw that. And it was like our brother on the far end, abuser, you as Ellie, our mother to my left, and then I was on the far right because there was no one next to me on my right. And so we're listening to the therapist, and a lot of it is just kind of like, I don't want to say fluff, but a lot of it was just words to kind of build up to the climax response of there's going to be a legal separation. So it was like 5 minutes of, the therapist kind of telling you guys as the kids who were like 14, 12 at the time, like, your parents love you very much and this wasn't really easy, but this blah, blah, blah. So like there was just this build up to this revelation. And she was just saying there's going to be a legal separation. And what that means is that, things are going to look different and your father's going to move out for a time and have his own place. And there's going to be structured visitations of when you go and how long he has you and for how long and yada, yada, yada. And you guys were crying, and subsequently parents were crying because kids were crying. Right. And I was just sitting there just thinking.
Not crying.
No, I wasn't crying at all. No. I was just retreating inwards, and not because I was afraid. That was when I just had a decision to make, because I knew that this was going to be a pivotal decision for me as to what my life was going to look like after this announcement.
Yeah.
And counselor was talking. I was just kind of half listening, but also inside my head, having to come to this conclusion, which was, here's your opportunity to escape and get freedom. You can either choose to stay in this situation with your family and be part of what has always been. So essentially, nothing has changed. The only difference is just your abuser is no longer in the house, but your abuser is still around, and we're all still walking on eggshells and not telling the truth and, all that fun stuff.
Right.
Or you can break away. And it was having to weigh those two options and go, okay, what are the pros and cons of each? And essentially what I was having to weigh right then and there was, I remember telling myself, Zach, if you walk away now, you could potentially never have a relationship with your brother and your sister again because of how it's going to look. And because your siblings don't know the truth, but you do, you risk that if you want freedom, it's going to come at a cost. And I decided right then and there that if not having a relationship with you and our brother meant that I could be free, I was willing to take it. And I was going to take it. And I was willing to lose my relationship with my family if it meant that I was no longer a prisoner. And it wasn't like an easy decision. I had to come up with it in like 5-10 minutes while this counselor was talking, but that was kind of the situation that I had to weigh. And it looks like you have a question to ask, so go ahead.
I do. That thought never came to mind during your healing of considering potentially what would life look like without a relationship with our abuser?
As far as I was aware, well, no. I mean, you're talking about like while I was off at college, did I ever have a thought of breaking away and what that would look like? Yes and no. Like, yes, that's fantasy.
Okay.
In terms of wishful thinking, magical thinking, like
Right.
kind of like winning the lottery. Wouldn't it be nice? But you kind of feel like it'll never happen, but it's
Right.
still fun to wish.
Sure.
So no, I mean, yes, I would think about it, but I also kind of knew that as long as things were the way that they were, no, like nothing was going to change. And it wasn't like one day we were just gonna wake up and tell you and our brother, like, this is the real truth. We've just been hiding it for years. Like,
Yeah.
I knew that wasn't gonna happen. And
Right.
I also knew that at the time, my inner dialogue was, if I remember asking or wishing I could ask our mom when I was 14, which would have made you like 8, 9.
Yeah.
I remember wishing while our parents were pastors, why can't our mom just divorce this man?
Mm.
And I never asked her because I would have gotten in trouble for asking that back then.
Sure.
But because that wasn't an option for our mom at the time. That wasn't something that she, even if she thought it wasn't a thing that she was weighing. She was hoping that he could be healed and be restored, and if, go to therapy and work on this and yada yada. And it's like, yeah, so obviously divorce is not an option for you right now because you want to work on this. And I'm not saying she shouldn't have had that perspective, but it's kind of like if you want to go to the gym and I want to eat junk food all the time, I'm not gonna, yes, it'd be fun to wish that you would join me in the junk food, but if you're also trying to lose weight and be healthy, we're at an impasse here, you know, like that's just not gonna be something I'm gonna ask you to do because I know the answer is gonna be, nah, not really in the cards for me right now.
Well,
So yeah, I mean, I would think about,
Yeah, because the actions prove otherwise, though, of just the actions and the momentum and where they're going.
I already walked away essentially 4 years prior, knowing that I would have to go back. So I was not unrealistic about the situation I was walking back into.
Okay.
I knew that if I was going back home, that things would be the way that they were, or at least something close to it. Doesn't mean I liked it, but I was very realistic about what I was walking back into. I was going back to Egypt. God brought me out of the promised land. And when you have to go back to Egypt, that's not really a thought of, well, what would I say if I was in Pharaoh's face again after 4 years? Like, no, I already know what Pharaoh's going to say. I already know if we didn't leave on good terms, I'm not coming back on good terms,
Well, so fast forward back to the counseling session and the dilemma that you were facing yourself with. and that train of thought that you were in of, if I say that I don't want relationship, that means I'm not going to have relationship with the rest of my family.
My siblings.
Yeah.
At that point, Mom already kind of had an idea to an extent of where I was at. I think her and I never really talked about my healing. I kind of kept that to myself. But yes, I'm pretty sure when I had my healing, I'm pretty sure I had conversations with Alice and other people who helped me through my healing process, where I was prompted with, hey, one day you're gonna have to make hard decisions. One day you're probably going to have to, like, I remember like one time she told me, like, I know right now it's really easy to be upset with your father, but one day you're probably going to be upset with your mother for everyone's contribution in this whole thing. I never really got mad at Mom for that, but there is something to be said about, as you go through a healing journey, you start to realize who had responsibility and what. Sure. And everyone gets their fair share of the humble blame pie. So I'm pretty sure it was prompted to me, like, like, hey, if your siblings don't know the truth, eventually one day, if you're wanting to walk in the truth, it's going to offend, and you don't know how that's going to be. So you just need to be prepared that if you're going to walk in truth, there's consequences for it. There's good and bad for doing the right thing, right? And I don't think I was thinking about that when that was happening, but that was what was put in front of me. It was, if you choose to not participate in this, there are going to be consequences. And it was thinking, okay, well then what's the most extreme consequence that could happen from this? And it was, you would not have relationship with your siblings. They could hate you for this. They could never want to see you again. It's like, okay, is that worth it? And I had to weigh that and just go, yeah, I would rather be free and miss out on having a relationship with my siblings because they think I'm the villain. I'd rather do that than be a prisoner to this for the rest of my life. Because I've already done 4 years of healing. I've already done work on myself. I would be walking right into the enemy's camp willingly if I chose to stay. And if I chose to shut my mouth and go along with this and participate. And so in my head, I just said, okay, well, if this is what I'm going to choose, then I have to own it. And so as the counselor was talking, eventually she got to a point where she was talking about visitation and that, our abuser would have to live somewhere else. And she was telling you and your brother, like, yeah, so this is what it's going to look like, yada, yada. And during the school year, it'll be this. Holidays, it'll be this. This is the structure, blah, blah, blah. And I think there was a point where she's like, outside of when it's his designated time to have you guys, I want there to be a day or an evening where you guys all do something together. So outside of when you and your brother would go be with him and it was his time, she wanted there to be this time outside of that paradigm to where, like, I don't know, maybe like after church, kids and the dad go out and have lunch or something like that.
Interesting.
Just something. Just well, you were crying your head off.
I don't even remember that actually playing out.
Yeah, I mean, I could be very loose with my details in terms of what I'm saying right here, but
you're in the
I do remember
a crisis in your head too. So
yeah, but I remember she was talking about that, and she asked me to be a part of that.
Mm.
Um,
Okay.
and when she said that, I just said no.
Hmm.
Simple, no.
I do remember
And
that.
I remember she kind of tilted her head a little bit, and she said, "Well, I think it'd be a really good idea if I would really encourage you to, whatever, whatever." And I said, "I hear what you're saying, but for right now, no." And that's all I said. And then she kind of moved on. She's like, "Okay, well, let's just kind of continue to talk about how this is going to play out." And um eventually we were out of there. It was probably a 30-minute spiel, but it felt like we were there forever.
Yeah.
And there's just things that I remember. Like, I don't remember the drive home a lot. But I will say one of the things that
I remember crying more when you said no.
oh,
That's all I remember, but I remember hearing you saying no and thinking, why? Like, what's wrong with you?" But of course, how I was young, I didn't know what that meant either.
that was your perspective at that time.
That was my perspective of just remembering I just remember you saying no. I didn't
Mhm.
know why, and there was no telling or no, in my perception, to lead up to this point.
Mhm.
Why would you say no? Like, you just came back from school. Why would you say no? You know?
Cuz I was a meaner.
Oh
For
no.
context, for context, you guys, when my brother and sister were growing up and they were learning how to speak and learning actual correct grammar, because as kids, you can kind of get away with not saying complete sentences, but still communicating. And they wanted to combine, like, you're a bad person and you're mean
Like, but you're
together.
worse than mean. Like,
And so, like, you're a meaner. So mean with an ER at the end. You're a meaner is what they would say all the time. So, um,
oh my gosh, it's been a while since I've heard that.
you're a meaner. Yeah,
But
I mean,
but
and
yeah,
that was
that's all I
that.
remember.
Well, and that's kind of the risk, right? It was right
Yeah.
then and there. It's whatever you say, however you choose to go from here is going to have consequences. Be sure you can live with the consequences. And my thought was, would it suck if I lost my relationships with my siblings? Yep. But at the same time, I don't want to go back to evil.
Well, and it makes
And if
sense
that means that
now.
I lose, then it means that I lose relationships. But if it means that I can be free, then I'm going to choose freedom every single time. And
Well,
that is a very black and white situation. But,
absolutely.
I had to make something that was very difficult, very concrete. And that was my choice. And I don't regret it. But there was a lot of things that I had to weigh in that, like, 5 to 10 minutes of going, like, okay, there's a separation. This is my chance. I may never
Right.
get a chance again. If I want to break away, what is that going to look like? And I just had to think it through really quick, but also, like, contemplate it at the same time. But anyway, I remember going home knowing that the truth wasn't going to be revealed for a long time. And I just knew that. I knew that from
Mm.
just how our mom was at that time, how our abuser was at that time, how young you guys were. Even though you guys weren't like babies, you weren't toddlers, you had the capacity to comprehend complicated things. It was just shielded from you.
Very much so,
And
yeah.
I remember, like, specifically when he came home from work, and it was this whole cry session again, which I'm not trying to diminish,
Sure.
but for me, it felt very theatrical because while I had compassion and empathy for you and our brother, it just felt super disingenuous for our abuser to be crying in the midst of it too. I'm not trying to say he didn't have sad emotions, but like mom and I were sitting next to each other on the couch, and you and our brother were like cuddling with him on the big chair.
Yeah, that recliner thing.
And so it's just like, okay, so same situation, same thing. It's you three, us two, you know. And I remember you asked him a question,
I
and
asked him
that
a question.
question was,
Okay.
do you remember what that question was?
No clue.
You asked him, did you ever hit our mom? And his response was, there are things that I know I shouldn't have done in my
Yeah, I remember
past, but
that.
I don't do them anymore.
Yeah, I remember that.
Or something to along that lines. He didn't answer it with
But
a
he
yes or a
answered
no. He just said, there's some things that I shouldn't have done. Which you can, from a certain point of view, you could say that's a nice way to say yes.
Mm-hmm.
But also from another point of view, that's a nice way to not be honest and upfront and say yes. You know. And I remember when he said that, that was affirmation to me of like, I made the right decision, because
Yeah.
he can't be honest. He's not going to be honest. Here's the time to bear it all. And like, if you really wanted restoration in the family, if you really wanted us to be a healthy, happy family built upon the truth, right? It's no different like if you watch Dr. John Deloney and someone calls in about, infidelity in their marriage. He always tells that person, the old marriage you had in the past is gone.
Yep.
You now have an opportunity to either build something new or just watch it crumble and walk away. And so here was a moment where we could have built something new. And it could have been built on the truth. It could have been built. I'm not saying we could have all spent the whole night just talking about all the crap that got done, but that was kind of, that right there was the genesis. It could have been the genesis, the new start, the new, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, the do-over of, no, let's come together as a family and do this. And the fact that he couldn't be honest about it, I was like, okay, yeah, no, this, I made the right call. And case in point, he moved out. I don't remember how long it took him to move out, but he moved out and he had his own place. And that was a really rough time, because at that time, I was enrolled into grad school and I was working part-time, and I was paying rent at home, not a ton, but a little bit, because mom didn't work, so she needed some of our abuser's money from his work to pay for the bills, to maintain the home while he lived elsewhere. And it was just this big change.
Yeah.
And I just remember it was not a good change. I remember at that time, you and our brother were going to a particular church, and that youth leader got really involved in the idea of the separation.
Yeah.
And was telling you and our brother that, it's not God's will for there to be divorce, and, blah, blah, blah. And that caused a whole thing, because you guys would come home crying, not really understanding what was going on. And then I remember I wasn't involved with anything when it came to the separation and him leaving. I just remember when he left, there was just this sense of peace in the house for the first time ever. And that was really sad to admit.
Sure.
But it was also very freeing. And
everyone can breathe.
Yeah, but also at the same time, like, I could breathe. You guys couldn't,
No.
But
but there were no fights that just happened out of nowhere, and no like drop of a hat scenarios. No one was walking on glass.
No one was walking on glass, but at that time, there was different conflicts. You and our brother were confused. There were times where you guys got angry. There was there, so it wasn't like we were conflict free. It was just a completely different kind of conflict happening. And
Sure.
um I remember you would tell me, because like there were times where I don't remember completely the arrangement of when you guys would go and leave with him to go spend the night where he was at or whatnot. I don't remember how many days a week it was. I want to say it was like one weeknight and the weekends he had you, but I can't remember. But what would happen was he would bring you back home at night, and he would park down on the street and you guys would have to walk up. And I remember um it was told to me, I think once by you, that sometimes when he would drop you off, he would tell you guys that, me specifically, that like I was bad, that it wasn't fair that I got to be in the house and our abuser couldn't. That he's not your dad, I'm your dad, and it's just wrong that he's there, and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And then I also remember there were some times, because I worked night shifts where I worked at the time, and he would be there on the bottom of the house, and I wasn't going to go drive up the driveway. I would just park like blocks away from the road, because I could tell
Yeah.
no one ever parked on the bottom of the road. So,
Yeah.
so when you're driving down, you can see there's headlights right where your house should be. I was like, okay, that's him, because he drove
Right.
a truck. And I could just tell. And so I would like park, but I guess there was a time that our brother saw that and he got mad at me for doing that. And I was like, I don't know what you want me to do, bro. Like, I just want peace in my life, but whatever. And I think that's kind of the start of where our brother really stopped. I think that's where our relationship kind of stopped.
Yours and younger brother?
Because it didn't stop entirely, but he and I had a conflict, because he would tell me all the time. He was like 12, 13 at that time, and he would tell me like, you're not my dad, you can't tell me what to do. And I'm like, you're right. I'm not your dad, because if I were, I'd beat the crap out of you. But he was just a young teenager, and he was very angry with me, and that started causing a rift. And I remember another time, like Mom and we would go talk. And I like to say this is kind of like where you started having your separation anxiety issues. Because Mom and I would go to the grocery store. Because Mom and I would go to the grocery store, and then you would like call on the home phone, one of us, going, when are you coming back? And we'd be like, we literally just left 5 minutes ago to go get groceries. And you're like, okay, we'll come back soon. Like, you would just call us all the time. But that was like our chance, because we would never talk about, Mom and I, we would never talk about anything pertaining to this family situation inside the house. We just wouldn't. We just didn't feel like that was wise. We didn't think that was fair.
Sure.
And so we were just like, if we're going to talk about anything relating to this, it's going to be when we're out and about. So yeah, there were a lot of times we had to go to the grocery store for no reason other than to just vent and talk, And I remember one time, right when the separation happened, you guys went to a youth camp thing with the church that you went to. And one of the things that our abuser was told was, because he was involved with like the youth ministry. And so there was things that our mom, in order to put the marriage first, they had to both prune some things that they were involved in order to make space and room to invest in their relationship. So for Mom, it was some things that she was a part of. For our abuser, it was some things that he was a part of. One of the things that he was a part of was being on like the worship team thing. And
Yeah, and he was like
and he could not go and be a part
coach or
of.
something.
Excuse me?
Yeah, I was trying to say, yeah, he was also not just part of the worship, but he was also like a parent in the youth group to help oversee.
Yeah, I didn't really know much about his involvement. I just knew that he did music there a lot. So anyway, long story short, you guys went off to camp. We're thinking our abuser is just living his best life somewhere in town. And Mom and I were getting ready to do a yard sale, which I don't know why we always did yard sales in the summer, because our house was just in the direct sun 24/7.
It was.
And it was hot, triple digits all the time.
Yeah.
But here we were getting ready to do a yard sale, and she's looking at pictures that were uploaded on Facebook about the event that you guys were on. She's like, "Oh, it'd be really fun to see if we can see Ellie." And she's going through it, and I was like,
I need to
"Why are you
bleep that
putting
out.
out your?" No, you don't.
Yeah, I do.
We've mentioned our brother's name before. It's fine.
No, I've bleeped it out before to protect him. Anyway.
Well, Ellie's interjecting into my thought. Anyway, she's going through Facebook pictures and she's scrolling through on the computer, and I tell her I caught why are you laughing at me?
Oh, you're just humorous. You caught who?
I caught a close up. Well, I guess it wasn't a close up, but someone did like a panorama view in a way.
Yeah.
Where like you could see the kids up front, but all the adults in the back.
Yeah.
And I caught him, and I said, "Mom, no, wait. Go back a few pictures. I think that's him." And she did, and we looked, and she said, "Oh my gosh, it's him. He went, and he wasn't supposed to."
The abuser. Yep.
And I was like, "Uh-huh." So there was just enough that was kind of happening with that whole thing.
And
in my heart of hearts.
And of course, I didn't know that at the time either.
No, you didn't, So
and I don't think our younger brother did either.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Again, the truth wasn't revealed to any of you for a long time.
Well, and then on top of that,
ever.
But just on top of that, though, too, now knowing that, I learned that story somewhat, within a year ago or so. But that's just another part of the scenario that he would try to build, so that way our younger brother and I wouldn't be told the entire truth, so that way we're just thinking that he was coming along. Cool, great. We didn't know the grounds of the rules of what was supposed to be pruned in order to be marriage focused first or whatever. So and I don't remember if there was any follow through in them two and him being caught in that, like getting in trouble or whatever.
Oh, there was.
Right. But then I don't remember learning that, and therefore.
Well, sure, because you're right, but that's because Mom and I were the evil ones. He was the good one. And he wasn't going to tell you that he lied and did stuff that he wasn't supposed to do. No. And Mom wasn't going to tell you guys, like she, which rightfully so, you don't weaponize the kids to be mad at the other parent. Especially during a separation like that, you don't do that. So that's one of those things where, like, I don't blame any adults in that situation for not involving the kids, but that was the kind of stuff that he was pulling. And I just remember during the whole time, I knew in my heart of hearts, I'm like, I don't want relationship with this guy.
Right.
I don't, not interested, don't want it, and he would, even though he would tell you guys that I was this awful older brother for being able to live in the house and he couldn't, He would still approach me, usually over a call, and just go like, we need to talk about our relationship. And I would just say, what relationship? I don't know what you're talking about. And I wasn't really mean about it. I was just very matter of fact. Like, so this
Yeah.
separation happened for about 2 to 3 years. Okay. During the first year, so like the separation happened in the summer, he would periodically ask me like, when can we work on our relationship? When can we do this? When can we do that? And I think there was probably one time I probably had lunch with him just to kind of give in a little bit so he would stop bothering me a bit.
Okay.
But I remember we went out to lunch or dinner one time, and he was just asking me about my life and what I was doing, and I just remember we were talking, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I've enrolled into graduate school, and I'm about to start that, towards the end of the summer." And I remember he told me that that was a very unwise decision for me to get more debt and that I shouldn't do it. And I was just like, thanks for your input. Thank you. Great. Appreciate it. But I kind of gave him what he wanted a little bit, but I also didn't. And so he kept like, I knew back then, like that was just the nature of a manipulator, because his whole goal was to get me to reduce my boundary down
Yeah.
and take that. And now that he had an inch, that meant that he had an inch, and there was nothing going to stop him from getting 2 inches, 3 inches, 4,
A mile.
right?
Yeah.
So I knew right then and there, like, okay, yeah, no, no, we can't do this. And so he would keep asking, when can we work on a relationship, blah, blah, blah. And I remember it got to the point of like the first time where we had to figure out like, what are we doing for the holidays? What are we doing for Thanksgiving? What are we doing for Christmas? What are we doing for New Year's? How's this all going to look? This is the first time any of us in the family have had to deal with a separation. So
Right.
what does that even look like? Is he invited? Is he not invited? Blah, 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 And so I remember, I think it was, I was actually house sitting at the time during Thanksgiving. And I remember our abuser called me, and he was saying something like, oh yeah, like, we need to work on our relationship. And I was like, I need space. I can't do that right now. And I remember he asked, well, what is it going to look like when we're there with each other on like Christmas? Like, how's this going to work? If you don't want to have a relationship, how's this going to work? And I told him, I think it's going to work out like how every other Christmas has been, which is you're in the other room with my brother and my sister, and the rest of the family is elsewhere. So I don't think it's going to be any different than what it's ever been. So I don't know why we have to talk about this. Like, that's exactly what's going to happen, And he would get mad at me, and he would be like, well, we need to work on this or whatever. And I'm like, well, I'm not ready now. That's just what I would tell him. I'm not ready now. And then I remember like, then Christmas came around, he was at the house for Christmas morning, I think, or Christmas evening. I can't remember. We opened up presents. That was a big funny thing. Not haha funny, but there was a story in there where, well, there's a story in there because he decided to get you and our brother smartphones for Christmas.
Oh, that's
and
right.
His presents for mom and I were just more cosmetic. Like, I got like a razor, like to shave, and he wasn't supposed to do that with the smartphones because our mom didn't want you guys having computers, and his excuse was, well, they're not computers. They're not laptops or tablets or whatever. So there was just enough that was happening where I'm like, this guy's just he's not getting it for some reason.
Yeah.
And so eventually I made a choice to go move back up north to go live, because I found a place to live. and I didn't want to be back down where we were at living. I wanted to be away. I wanted to go back um, to
Can I
where I was
ask a
at
question
before.
real quick, actually?
Go for it.
Did the rest of the family know about the separation when it was
Mm-hmm.
happening?
Mm-hmm.
Really? Because I don't remember anyone trying to force something to be so normalized. Meaning,
Well,
like,
what would that have looked like from your perspective?
uh, grandma would, I don't know, not connect with us more, but there was a season where grandma would take us out on Fridays when we were really young. But I don't know, just nothing felt out of the ordinary where our family members, outside family members, were being intentional and trying to connect because, hey, this awful thing's happening in your life, type of thing.
I th- I, I don't think our family knew the reason why there was a separation in the first place.
Okay.
They knew that there was one, but they were not told as to why, or at least not the whole entirety of the why. Um, and I know that just because there was times where I was open and honest about how I felt about it, and some family members were very displeased on what I said. And that's fine, but that's also because they didn't know to the extent of like what was going on. And
Sure.
also there's an argument to be had where like one thing um like if you overreact and try to overcorrect a situation,
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't always work. It's kind of like when a baby like is trying to learn to walk and falls down, and if you go hyper,
Yeah.
you know,
Baby's
reaction
gonna
like, oh my
cry.
gosh, my poor baby, oh my gosh, oh my god, right, versus if you just act normal, then
Yeah.
the baby's not going to associate falling down with this big catastrophic thing,
Right.
and they're not going to associate that this now warrants fear, right?
Right.
Versus if you just act normal, then the babies kind of go like, okay, no one's freaking out,
Right.
cool.
Right.
Same to be said here. If you act normal, there's something to be said about giving you a structure of normal, you know?
Right.
Because a lot of times when people overcompensate, you kind of go, yeah, the only reason you're here is because you think I'm sad. The only reason you're now talking to me more or investing in me more is because, I'm sad. You weren't like this when I wasn't sad.
Right.
So I can't speak for them, but I think they didn't really know the whole extent. And also, I think at that time, the best thing for you guys was just a sense of normal. And if you
Yeah.
don't break away from that normal, it gives you some sort of rooted foundation of being able to consistency.
Yeah.
Um, but
So
anyway,
sorry. Going back to you deciding to
no,
move.
it's fine. No, it's fine. Yeah, I had decided to move um the next calendar year, early in the calendar year. So the separation happened in 2013. I decided to leave in 2014. And
Oh
I remember
gosh.
I um I remember I had so we had like a little party, like a going away party as a family
Mm-hmm.
at our grandparents' house. Um and he was there, and it was just to wish me well, like, okay, cool. He's going to go. And and I told everybody there, like, yep, I'm leaving on this date. I'm leaving at this time because it takes me like 6 hours to get there,
Mm-hmm.
so like whatever. And I remember I left at a time when you guys were at the house, not when you were with the abuser. But I had my room packed up, I had my car packed, everything was ready. I was getting ready to go, and our abuser was trying to stall it. And he kept calling and going like, "No, you need to wait. I need to go there and say goodbye." I said, "No, you don't. I need to go." you know. He's like, "Well, no, it's not fair. I need to say goodbye." And I said, You have known when I was leaving, what time I was leaving. It's been in conversation. It wasn't just a one-time thing at the party, but like I let everybody know in a group text when I was leaving at what time. It's not my fault that you decided to wake up late or whatever the excuse was,
Right.
And I was like, quite frankly, I don't want to say goodbye. I need to go. I don't need you to. I told him like, I don't need you to be here and make this a whole thing, because it's not about that. We don't need that right now. My brother and sister are already upset that I'm leaving. We don't need you don't need to be added to this mix, And I remember he was crying on the phone, and he was just saying that, he wished that things were better and whatnot. And I remember this is probably one of those things where it's like, if I could have done it over, I probably would. But at the time, I was just I needed to just not be around him and the whole situation. But I remember he was crying, and he told me over the phone, like, "I love you." And I just said, "Okay." And I hung up because I don't mean to laugh. Like, it wasn't funny, but it was just like, I couldn't trust it. Sure. I couldn't trust it. It was theatrical to me. I didn't have any patience for that. And I just said, "Okay." And I hung up, and I got my car. We said goodbyes, and I left. He didn't come to the house or anything. I just left and did my own thing. And even when I was away, and I was living up north, he would still try to email, text, call, let's work on our relationship, whatever. And I remember I had never had a session with the counselor.
Yeah.
Never. But I did email her probably about 2 months after I got up north. Mm-hmm. And you check your camera?
No.
Okay.
But thanks for asking.
At least camera craps out. And that's why if you watch the latest episode, it's just like me talking to a black hole for 40 minutes because her camera crapped out on us.
We were fine without you mentioning it.
Well, I just wanted to offer.
You did more than offer.
Yeah. If any of you guys have money, get Ellie a new camera because she has issues with it.
No. My camera's great.
Please do. No, it's not. It craps out on her.
Well, if anything, money will go towards paying off debt, so we're not going to even go there. Anyway, go back to the story.
Get her a camera. Don't give her money. Just give her a new camera.
Golly, love you.
So I did email her, and I believe actually it wasn't that long ago that I forwarded you that email correspondence between her and I.
Mm-hmm. You did.
And essentially, I was telling her, "Look, I am not interested in having a relationship with him. I will take responsibility here and say that I have perpetuated that notion, because every time he's asked, at most I could say was not now," which that kind of sounds like eventually. It doesn't say, it's not no, but it's also not yes. It gives the illusion that one day that will come. And I said, that day right now is not going to come. So is there something that I could say that he would be able to grasp, and it wouldn't like undo his therapy and undo all the progress that he's made? And she pretty much said like, well, at first she said, "I'm confused why you have this stance." And I was just like, it's okay. You don't have to know. It's just, this is my stance, you know, like in looking back in the emails, like I know I tried to explain to her, like, this is just where I'm at, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's not right or wrong, it's just where I'm at. And so right
Mm-hmm.
now the answer is no, and I don't want to keep revisiting this. And so she's like, no, yeah, you can say that. Just know that this comes with consequences. And I was like, yep, I got it. Totally get it. Thank you. You know, thanks. Thank you for the feedback. You know, she did her job and that was fine. There's nothing wrong with what she said. But it was just really interesting looking back at that correspondence of like, that's how I also knew back then, even now, but back then, that whatever this therapy he was having with her, the truth wasn't being revealed as to what he had done,
Yeah.
what he, the damage that he did, to the extremity, you know, of what he did. Because her response, and I don't blame her, but just the response that she had was like, I'm just really confused why you have this stance, you know. Not that she needed to know all the grime and dirty details of everything that he had done and how he treated me. But there was just like, no, like, hey, I can see why you would have this response, or I could kind of, from what I know, you know, I can understand this, but, you know, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? Can I help you navigate this? So that's how I also kind of knew, like, okay, like, clearly how he treated me is not something that is being brought up in their marriage counseling, which it shouldn't. It should have been our mom and him. But, you know, at that point, my perspective was, I don't want a relationship with this guy. And there's been too much abuse. There's been no accountability. And I just don't want this. I want to be free. I want to be free. And I took it. And there was a time where it was like in the summer of 2014, and I remember our abuser and we had a phone call, and it wasn't a long phone call. It was probably like maybe 20-ish minutes. And I broke up with him. And he took it very well. So it was a very stark contrast from like when I left our hometown to go back up north, and he was crying and he was emotional and he was like, let's work on this and blah, blah, blah. And I said some pretty serious things. Like I didn't like really sugarcoat stuff, but I also didn't like come at him with like a mallet and smack him over the head. But sure. I told him specifically, like, it is an honor and a privilege to call someone father, and you haven't earned that. So I'm not going to call you that. That's not who you are to me. A father doesn't do this to their children. So to me, you haven't earned that title, and I'm not going to call you that. And because of that, I don't want to have a relationship. I'm fine if we have to be cordial with each other, and if we have to be around each other, like I'm fine interacting with you, but it's not going to go anything beyond a like acquaintance type level of interaction with you. You know, I'm not going to tell you how I am. I'm not going to tell you about my life. I don't want you telling me about that, you know. But I told him, like, I don't want relationship. We do not have a father-son relationship, and we've never had that. And what I told him was, you've already lost a child, and you have an opportunity here to save your marriage and work on relationships with your other two children. I suggest you invest in that because you've already lost me.
Yeah.
And I told him, like, I'm not going to get in the way of that. Like, I'm not going to like call and text our siblings and tell them all the crap that you've done. I'm not going to get in the way of that. But you have an opportunity to turn some things around for the people that are still willing to be in your life and have relationship with you. I'm just not one of them. And he's like, yeah, but you know, you're my son. And, you know, I'm like, yes, but you have another son and you have a daughter. And I suggest you, if you don't want to lose a child, I say you have two more. You've lost one. Mm-hmm. Go work on your relationship with your other kids. Um, and I just told him, like, we're not a father son. That's just not how I see us, and I don't want that kind of relationship. And his response was like, okay, I understand. Thank you for telling me, and you know, I'll talk to you when I talk to you. And I was like, okay. So there
Mm.
wasn't any yelling, there was no crying, I was anticipating it to be this big theatrical thing, but it really wasn't.
Mm.
Um and that was pretty much my walking away. Um and there were countless times, which we can go into at another time. We don't need to talk about it now, but there are other times where he, kept trying to come back, and I kept telling him no. You know, kept telling him no. Like, I don't want this. It hasn't changed for me. And I wasn't rude to him. I wasn't mean to him. I didn't disrespect him. Um, it was a really weird split in my head. The way that I kind of like put it in my brain was, he's married to my mom and he's the father of my siblings, but I don't have a relationship with him. So he's part of the family, but he and I just don't have a relationship, and that's fine. That's just how I grew to accept it and make sense of all of it, because I was still there for holidays, and I would still come down for events and stuff.
Right.
And we would have to interact to a degree, so that just became my new normal. It was like, yeah, I don't have a dad, um and that's fine, you know and and the whole um the whole what's the word I'm trying to say, the precursor to me walking away was just a combination of everything, an accumulation of everything that had happened before, which was just the abuse, the healing, and coming to the decision of, I have an opportunity here to be free. Do I want to take
Yeah.
it, or do I not want to? And I jumped at the opportunity to leave. And it was really funny because, like, I didn't know at the time, like, I would say probably now in 2025, there are a lot more conversations of strained relationships with family members and people blocking each
Sure.
other and not
Sure.
having anything to do with them. But 10 years ago, that really wasn't the norm, Um, and I had my fair share of people giving me their feedback on, yeah, you shouldn't have done that. And he's your dad. And,
Yeah.
you probably broke his heart. And, it's, you probably just did that because you were mad or whatever. And I'm like, okay, that's your position. You didn't grow up in my life,
Yeah.
you know? Um, so, my walking away was more of there being a situation where there was a choice to be made. And it wasn't something that I was looking for, but it was something
Sure.
that presented itself, and I took it because I didn't know if I was ever going to get that opportunity again. And, seeing how our family has played out, I never would have had an opportunity other than our current family situation.
Right.
But, it was messy. And I know that even when I left, um, I I had to I had to consider the idea that he would tell you guys, oh, Zach doesn't want a relationship with me, and Zach left. And, I'm like, yeah, he
Yeah.
could totally throw me under the bus and make me look like a villain, but I don't care. If it means I'm free, it means that I'm free. I don't care. I really don't care. Um, so I don't know if he ever did that. I mean, you can correct me if he ever did.
I don't remember much of that ever really happening.
Mhm.
Because remind me, when did you break up with him over the phone?
That was 2014.
I was in the middle of high school at that time, and
Mm-hmm.
he didn't come back home yet at that time.
No, he
And
didn't.
there was more messed up stuff happening that
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't put together the whole older brother dynamic in the mix. Like, I was dealing with my own problems and
Right.
chaos that I didn't know how to fully function.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say it makes sense now, since doing the podcast. What I've learned, and I'm taken aback at, is it makes sense why you walked away. You had 4 years of freedom and healing and growing and learning and unlearning and spiritual growth and spiritual healing on top of it all. That when an opportunity came for, hey, you want to visit this back again? Heck no. No. I've worked too hard for it. Meaning you've worked too hard for it. You've fought for it. You cried for it. You bled for it. You went above and beyond to fix wounds that you didn't get yourself into in the first place.
Yeah.
And the fact that the same person who's holding the gun, so to speak, metaphorically, is wanting you to trust them. And you're like, I know my first round lesson. I'm not going to go through this again. It's not that I've come back better and stronger to fight you. I'm not going to fight you.
That was a... Yeah, I mean, I remember, like I said, like when I moved back, there seemed to be signs that things were a little bit better.
Sure.
And so I wasn't putting my hope in that, but that was just something that was like, okay, cool. Maybe things are a little bit better. Maybe he's working on things since he's in therapy, and I learned after the separation happened that he and our mom had been in therapy for a long time. That wasn't just the first time they ever went to therapy,
Yeah.
And so you kind of put all these things together and you're like, holy crap. So you're telling me he's been in therapy and he still acts this way. He still does this. There's been no positive change here. If I carry the two, what does the math say?
Right.
The math says that for whatever reason, he can't make this work.
Yeah.
He can't make it work. And that was one of the things that I remember. Fast forward when you moved back the first time. Well, not the first time, but when you came back into our hometown in 2022, 2023, when you came back from Texas, I had a very frank conversation with you where your and my relationship wasn't like necessarily better.
It wasn't much. It wasn't deep.
Well, it was deep enough to have conversations, but it wasn't. Our relationship wasn't restored.
No.
But I was telling you because you went to therapy. You went to the same counselor that was still seeing our abuser.
Yep.
So this counselor has been in the family picture for 10 plus years at this time.
Yep.
And I just remember telling you, like, look, you have to make a decision, because at that time, and we'll talk more about this, I think, in your story when we do the next episode of Walking Away, because even when you found out the truth through your healing, you still were hoping that he would just have this come to Jesus moment and turn around. And even though his behavior and actions were proving otherwise, you still had this hope. And I remember just telling you, I'm like, look, it's beautiful to have hope, but if you're going to go down this road where you're constantly going to be disappointed, then you need to pray to God daily to learn how to have a relationship with someone who is always going to disappoint you. And I told you, I am not strong enough to do that for myself. Right. I don't have the willpower to wake up every day, choosing a relationship with a person who is not interested and keeps disappointing me when it comes to the hope that I'm hoping for that person. So I'm like, if that's your journey, if you feel like that's what God wants you to do, if that's what he's telling you, if that's what he's anointing you, if he's giving you dreams and affirmations and people are telling you this, fine, get me out of the way. But you're going to have to figure out how to wake up every day with enough love that you're not going to be disappointed
Right.
in your father. And I'm not the person who can help you with that, you know,
and I mean,
or you're going to have to walk away and you're going to have to realize that the relationship that you want, you can't have. And I'm like, that's your journey. I've already gone through that journey. I've already made my peace with that journey. And I'm not, and my joke with you, it's not like a haha joke. My joke with you is that there's a lot that has happened in both of our lives where, you've like copied me in some things, you know?
I have.
And so, and that's not a bad thing, but like, this is like, you know, you went to my same school, you have tried to have the same relationships, same degrees, you know.
Yep.
You try to mimic me in a lot of ways, and I was just telling him like, look, I know that you have copied me in a lot of ways, and I am not saying that you have to have my stance here. That is your journey, and if you want to have a relationship with your father, I'm not going to get in the way of that. I'm not going to necessarily be a cheerleader for it. I'm not going to be rooting you on for it, but I'm also not going to get in the way of it, because like, I remember I told you, I'm like, because you were working on your relationship with him, right? At that time. And I was just trying to be very nice about it. And I'm sure there was moments where I was not, so I take accountability there. But I was just like, so Ellie, are you telling me that as long as he treats you better but treats our mom like crap, things are going to be good? And you're like, well, no, I'm not saying that. I'm like, okay, well, because I'm just telling you, he still treats our mom like crap.
Yeah, you were pretty straightforward with that.
Well,
you had to be, though, too.
It was because of where you were at. I was like, you need to be very sure of what you're choosing. And you need to be able to own up to what you're choosing. And that was like, so I was like, again, so if he treats me and your mom like crap, but he treats you better, does that mean that he's changed on the inside? Or does that mean that he's just changing his behavior? And that's for you to wrestle with. And if you, as my sister, if you're fine with that, if you want to look the other way at the abuse, but as long as your relationship with him is good, you're good, that's on you to walk with. That's on you to live with. And that's why, you know, my stance has always been, even if he did get healed, I don't want relationship with him. I can still wish him well. I can still wish that he gets healed and all that stuff, but it doesn't mean that I want to be reunited in fellowship with him. You know, that was my stance. And I gave you that permission. You didn't need my permission, but I gave you that permission to be like, it's okay for you to go down a different road than me, but just really make sure that you have Google Maps that road, so that way there's no surprises, you know. And so and that's all you can really do as a sibling, as someone that cares about you, is just be really sure on what you're choosing, because those are the exact same things that I had to come to. It was like, if I want relationship with my family, that means that I have to shut up. I have to pretend that things are okay. I have to lie. I have to betray myself. I have to betray the truth. And I was like, I can't do that anymore. There's a blog that Alice Mills had, and it was talking about the side effects of abuse, and it had a very powerful statement which pretty much just said, you know, the negative side effects of abuse are horrible. You can't remember things. You live in a state of fog. Your heart and your brain don't remember what joy looks like. And her statement was, now when it comes to having to be in a position to either choose abuse or not, I say no, because I love myself too much in order to expose myself to that any longer.
Right.
And there has to be a certain sense of honoring yourself, loving yourself, and going, no, I'm worth more than this. If the max that you can give me is abuse, I don't want it. That's not love. And I will not conflate those two and tell you as my abuser that it's okay for you to continue to do this to me. And so when you just add up everything, you look at the abuse that he did to me. I look at the abuse that he still had with our mom, the lies that he was telling you guys, the fact that he wasn't able to be open up and honest and still hasn't been. So like going back to the idea of, when you had asked him as a teenager, did you ever physically abuse our mother?
Mm-hmm.
He didn't come clean then, and he didn't come clean 10 years after either. It wasn't like, hey, now that you're grown, it's time for me to have a really real sit down with you and talk to you about some things that I'm not proud of, right?
Yeah.
He had years to own up to stuff, and he never did. Because he also knew that me and your mom weren't going to go and advertise that to you guys either. So there was safety that he had, knowing that he would never have to be accountable for things because it never had to be addressed. And you just look at all of that and you just kind of have to go, yeah, this is not someone who I can trust to be in a relationship. That was another thing I told him when I broke up with him was, I just lost it. Hold on. It was, accountability. What was I just saying?
Accountability. That's all I got. I don't know what you were going to say.
Well, it was something that I told him.
And I wasn't there.
I know you weren't there, but hold on. What was I just saying?
Talking about accountability and the fact that he didn't own up to what it... And hey, now that you're older, let me tell you something that I should have told you.
What did I tell him? Oh, yeah. I told him I couldn't. Oh, yes. I told him kind of two things. I told him one, I was like, you and I need to have our own healing journeys separate away from each other.
Yeah.
I said, if you truly want to be healed, you will go on this journey. You will go get the healing that you need. I will continue to heal. And I said, we can't do this together because if you and I chose to do relationship, you will continually disappoint me.
Yeah.
And I will continuously be angry with you and hold you to a standard that you can't be successful in. So it's not wise for me to be in a relationship with you, because every time I see you fall, every time I see you fail, every time you go back, every time you revert back to old tendencies, I'm going to be pissed off.
Yeah.
And I don't want that. That's what I told him. I do not want to be disappointed. I don't want that. But I said, if you get better, then maybe that's something in the future where we can come together, figure this out together, both being healed and being further along that journey, and come to a different position, But I'm like, but I can't trust you with that. You have proven yourself to be untrustworthy when it comes to doing things that you say that you're going to do. You never do them. So I can't trust you. You don't remember things, supposedly, which is really convenient,
Sure. Yeah.
But I was like, you have proven that you cannot be trusted. So no, I'm not going to go through a healing journey with you, and I'm not going to work on our relationship together because it's going to fail. And we both don't need that right now.
Right.
That's another thing that I told him when I kind of terminated relationship with him. And that wasn't built to hurt him, but that was just kind of also built as a reason for my stance, but also a hopeful realization for him of like, okay, I have things I need to work on. Someone that I care about supposedly that I care about is telling me some harsh truths. I should apply these. I should go to my counselor with these. I should start being more vulnerable and trying to figure out what's right, what's wrong. Is this just pain, or is there some truth to this? And really work on these things that someone is giving me feedback on, and he never did.
Yeah.
And again, like, I can look, and we'll talk about it at later times, but like, that was in 2014. We're in 2025 now. There's been 11 years of proof. 11 years of when I left him, what has he done to better his life? What strides towards healing and progress has he made? And it's nah. And again, that's just affirmation that I made the right choice.
Yeah.
It's affirmation that because even now he still doesn't like me. And he would tell me a long time ago, "Oh, I love you and you're my son," and blah, blah, blah. And in the same breath, he would tell you and our brother how awful I was. And that I was the reason why there was chaos in the family. And I was disrespectful. And, and he used me as a pawn for you guys, especially when you were trying to break away and get truth and not be exposed to his abuse. And he would be like, "Oh, you're pulling a Zach right now." Like, "Oh, you're that thing that your brother did because he's the awful one. Guess what? You're acting just like the awful brother." As a way to get you to not do that, to not leave his abuse. Yeah. And so there's just all these things that, even though I wasn't directly a part of, I wasn't directly tied to those revelations, for me on the receiving end, hearing about it is just like, yeah, just more proof that he hasn't changed, more proof that he, and it's funny because I always think back and go like, to be a fly on the wall during his therapy sessions, like, what is he telling his counselors that they like? Clearly, if the counselor was trying to help, counselors aren't doing a good job. So that's one theory, right? Either he's so beyond help and he's being honest with the counselors that clearly he can't apply that help, he can't apply that feedback, or he's lying and he's not being forthright about the abuse that he has perpetuated and his role in that. And he's lying about the reality of the situation that the whole family is in. Because it's like, if you wanted to go get better at something, you have to be open and honest about that and work on that, and your actions and the fruit that you bear would show that.
Yeah, they
just would. And so it's like, wow, there's 10 to 11 years of proof that there's been very little to no progress, and same situation and same old. And I think I remember it wasn't that long ago this year that I think our mom had a conversation with him, and he made a comment that he misses all of us. And I'm like, okay, I don't believe that. How many countless times has he ever said that? What has he done to rectify that? What has he done to, and he knows what he needs to do in order to have a relationship with all of us, maybe not like the nitty gritty, but like, there's been no positive fruit from his actions and his choices. And it's just like, yeah, those are nice words. I don't think they mean anything, because if behavior is a language, what is it saying? And that's one of the things, with my walkaway story, is like, it doesn't matter how many times he said certain things, or said what I wanted to hear, or said affirming language. What mattered was, did his words or did his actions match his words?
Yeah.
Did his behavior and choices match up to the things that he was saying? And sometimes they did, but it wasn't ever long lasting, which means that it was just behavior modification that he did. It wasn't really true heart postured change.
Right.
If you do something for a week the right way and then you just revert back to old tendencies and you don't think there's a problem, and that we just go back to the old, and if we go like, hey, you said we wouldn't do that anymore, and he's like, well, what's the problem? It's like, yeah, no, this isn't a heart posture change. You're telling me how valuable you perceive all of us to be, and it's a hard realization. It's hard to watch that and have to think like, wow, the person who's supposed to love and care about me and who's supposed to have this position in my life definitely feels a certain way about me, but their actions and their mannerisms and the things that they're telling me and how they're treating me is just so awful. Like, it sucks, and in case in point, that was like my encouragement to you not long ago. It's like, look, if your father is going to treat you like crap and you're going to show up every day with sacrificial love and you're going to allow him to just abuse you and you're going to do it with a smile on your face and with your arms open wide, that's very beautiful. It's very beautiful. But you're going to need some strong Holy Spirit armor to do that on a constant basis, because you are not the first person who's ever tried this.
Right.
And that's hard, because it's like, on one hand, you kind of feel like, wow, I'm kind of like, I'm destroying the hope in my sister, or anybody else. Like, I'm having to bulldoze over that and kind of tell them, good luck,
Right. Yeah.
But it's also just the reality of the person that you're working with, and case in point, even when I broke away from him, I did not tell anybody. I didn't tell our family. Mom knew, but I didn't tell you. I didn't tell my aunt, uncle, cousins, grandparents. I didn't tell anybody. And I'm pretty sure he told our brother. I'm pretty sure he talked a little bit to you, at least a little bit, of just like, oh, there's no relationship. Zach just does whatever he wants to do, and he and I just don't have a relationship. And I had to live with that, because I also knew, like, my siblings weren't going to come and ask me for the truth. They weren't going to come and be like, hey, and case in point, you guys never did, of like, hey, why don't you have a relationship with our dad? And, why do you want nothing to do with him? And why do you keep your distance? And why don't we ever hear you say that you love him? And, like, you guys never did. And I wasn't offended by that. I just knew that I could either be in the same prison as you guys, just a different jail cell, or I could be free from that prison. And it might mean that I never saw you guys again. So I had to make a choice, and I chose freedom, because at the end of the day, it was worth it to me. It was worth it to be free and to not forsake myself and forsake the truth that had been revealed by God to me.
Yeah.
And say, thanks for showing up, Lord, but I'm going to still go and bow down to the golden calf over here. Thanks for revealing yourself to us. Thanks for getting me out of Egypt. But in fact, I'm going to pull a U-turn and go right back to it. Like, that's a choice. And even if it meant that my loved ones were going to go back to Egypt, I was like, nah, I've seen enough. No, I've seen enough plagues. I've seen enough destruction. I don't need to see that anymore. I don't need to do that anymore. I need to walk away. And I did. And I have been ever since. And, you know, that's just kind of, that's my story.
It's your story.
Yep, that's my story.
Yeah.
It's just how that has come to be.
Yeah. And I know in later episodes we're going to talk about what that's looked like now and about and everything like that too. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for going through the healing. Thank you for doing the unimaginable and going beyond your comfort in order to go for your freedom. I mean, it took years, but you've paved the way for at least me to find my freedom too, and paved the way for our mom, and my prayers for our younger brother to find that freedom as well.
Yeah.
But you paved it and you started it, but I think that's a good cadence into this episode of just this is where we're at, and for me, praise be to God on that.
Yeah, no, that's just one of the things that, you know, in the risk of departing and not having a relationship with our abuser, no, you're right. Like, I broke away and I walked away, and it took years for both you and our mom to also do that. But you at least had someone who had done it and knew what it would take and knew how difficult it would be to make that decision, you know? Right. And it didn't mean that you had to do it, but you chose to, you know? And my breaking away 10 years ago, you know, plus years ago, is that risk of, hey, you may never have a relationship with your siblings again, you know. Took 10 plus years, but here we are.
Yeah.
You know, so it wasn't all for nothing, and it wasn't for the faint of heart, and it came with a lot of sacrifices and a lot of risks and a lot of coming to an acceptance of, yeah, I might lose everything, but I need to be free and walk with the Lord instead.
Right.
You know, and here we are making a podcast about, you know, that freedom is good, but it always comes with a cost.
Yeah.
And some people are willing and able to make that cost and take that risk, and some are not, you know. And we just hope that for those who are tired of being in a constant abuse cycle, that there is freedom out there. And yeah, it is a challenge and there's always risks with it, and sometimes you will have to do it alone, you know. And that's my story with me. Like, I had to do this on my own. I didn't have family members who were helping me with that. Like, I had mom, she knew, you know, and she supported me, but she also wasn't like cheering me on, like, yeah, go, leave, you know. And I did it in silence. I didn't tell my family. So I had to learn. I didn't have to learn to do it on my own, but I had to do it on my own. I didn't have friends who also left their parents who were also Christians and going through the same thing. There weren't support groups at my church to help with that. There weren't blogs and YouTube channels helping people navigate that thing. I had to do it all kind of on my own and just believe that I made the right choice, you know. It's kind of like going into the wilderness and just going, all right, here we go. You know, it's hard.
Yeah.
It ain't easy, but you know, it's the truth has a cost, and that's kind of the moral of the story. Everyone gets to choose whether or not they want to partake in that cost, or if it's that cost is too costly and they'd rather not, so, in case in point, even with where we're at right now at this point in time, our brother is still out there doing his thing, and he's only connected to our abuser, no one else. And I recently put the ball in his court and pretty much told him, like, yo, dude, there will always be a seat at my table here with your name on it, but at this point, you clearly don't want me in your life, and I respect your decision, but just know that the seat and the plate and the name tag, that's all for you. It's ready for when you come, but at the same time, we should be open and honest about what our stances are and what our boundaries are, because of all the damage that has happened within the family. And that's hard too. So for me, it's kind of like, I had to make that decision. Like, as much as it sucks to not have a relationship with our sibling, with our brother, I had to say goodbye to both of you when I was 21. It doesn't make it any easier, but that was like 12 years ago, and I haven't had a relationship with him for about that time, he's just an adult now. He's no longer a young teenager. He's now an adult making his own decisions and choosing who and who not to include in his life,
Right.
But that's his journey. And right now, my job is to do this podcast and to help people where they're at and be honest about my story. And my job isn't about trying to win back my brother. That's God's job. That's God's job to work on our sibling. And if our brother ever wants to know the truth, he knows where to find it. He knows exactly where to find it. And all I can do is, my heart can be broken that he's not with us right now and he doesn't want to be. But that's his journey. And all I can do is live my life and go on with my life and keep that seat at the table for him if ever he wants it. But if he doesn't want it, show up for people who do want me in their life. That's all I can do. And I can pray too, of course. Of course I can pray too. But I'm just trying to navigate that. It's like I had to make that call when I was 21, a long time ago. And I had to make that call within 10 minutes of being told of, like, here's a separation. And that was my conviction back then, and it's the same conviction now. If me walking in freedom means that I'm going to offend my family and they're going to be mad at me that I didn't choose abuse and I didn't want to walk in lies and just to have the family be together, it's okay. I don't want to be part of that. I'm an adult. I get to choose what I want to be a part of. And I have no direction from the Lord saying, yes, show up and be a part of that concoction. I don't think God calls us to things like that unless there's like a direct calling, to go and do that. I don't see where God wants us to be in abuse. We weren't built to endure abuse. Anyone who thinks that you can just endure it is lying to themselves, because we were not built to endure that. It has a cost. And in my situation, that cost would have been being at the mercy of my abuser, who would not love me, does not love me, and wants to see me destroyed. And for anyone who thinks that I should show up and be willing to be put under that scrutiny, be put under that abuse just because he has the title of a father, sorry, you go do that. You can choose to do that if that's what you want to do. But I did nothing to perpetuate how he treated me and how he's treated my mom and you. There's nothing, and we don't have to be prisoners if we don't want to. God, I believe, will always give you an out and always give you an opportunity to seek him and seek freedom. And it's up to us if we want it, and I just chose to want it and I did,
I think that's a good point. To like segue us out, unless you had other thoughts, and I'm sorry if I interrupted you.
No, you're good.
I think it was a good episode though.
Yeah. It was it's always interesting going back down memory lane and trying to recall kind of what happened,
Sure.
And I'm sure there's other details in the midst of all of that happened and I just can't accurately recall them, but it's it definitely is a choice, to walk away, and I did. And I don't regret it. It's come with some costs and some sacrifices. But at the end of the day, I've been able to keep myself intact, and I've been able to continuously heal and work on stuff. And, and I still deal with ripple effects from the abuse that I endured years ago that still show up as I'm in my 30s now, So, I mean, there's always work to be done, and there's always stuff to unlearn and undo and challenge and grow. And you can't do all of that when you're forcing to be in a relationship with someone who wants to tear you down and make you the enemy and treat you like the enemy and sees you as an enemy.
Yeah. You
can't win in that.
No, you
cannot have a blossoming, prosperous garden filled with good flowers and fruits and produce and all that stuff like that. You just can't. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work unless you just disassociate and you just don't ever walk in reality. There's no way for you to there's just no way to do it. So any listeners out there, if you are in a position where someone who loves you or who is supposed to love you is tearing you down and is blaming you for all of their issues, and refuses to take accountability, refuses to apologize, refuses to get better, you're in no obligation to drown with them. If you want to, you can.
Sure.
And God isn't going to force you to do anything. But if you want out, you got to also give God permission to get you out.
Yeah.
And sometimes getting out feels wrong. Because there will always be people in your life who have an opinion and who think that you're doing something wrong and you're not going about it the right way. But, the Bible says, I think it's in Ephesians, that it was always God's intention for us to be in holy, I think it says holy adoption into his family. And so it's look, you can't go wrong with choosing God and being the person that he says you are and walking in that identity with him. And if that means that you have to let go of people who do not encourage you to see yourself the way God sees you and don't encourage you to have a healthy relationship with God, then you need to make some serious choices as to who you're going to let into your inner circle like that, you know?
Yeah.
So with that, I think we're done. We're like close to 2 hours. Sorry,
Yep.
everyone. Chowies. Ellie's had a fart since the beginning of this episode.
Nope.
Yes,
Just
she
been
has.
making sure my
She-
my camera's working. So if they keep seeing me looking at my screen, that's why I need to check the time to make sure my camera doesn't go out on me.
She's been holding in a fart since we started.
Nope.
Well, with that, that's the end of our episode.
We'll see y'all next time. Thanks for listening.
Yep. Talk to you guys next time.
Yep. And Zach's paper on his jacket. Just want to mention it before we leave.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Covering up the logos.
Yeah, because we're not sponsoring
Yep.
anybody yet.
No,
Or
not
they're
yet.
not sponsoring us. That's the word.
Right.
Good job.
All right.
Good job, sir. Next time? Do it again next time?
Next. Sure. Why not?
Okay. Bye, guys.
Bye.